What is up, boys?
Hey.
Love of martial arts.
Yeah.
Tentative name of our podcast. People popping in. Yeah, it's been fun. And we've said this probably for 3 or 4 weeks straight, however long we've done this, but one of the best parts of the week for me.
Absolutely.
You know?
Agree.
Yeah. Good.
See you guys again.
Good to see you guys too. Well, our names, I was going to say my name's Robin Black, and that's Mallory Woods and Rich Chow, but our names are on the page. So we hang out, we talk about martial arts whenever we want. We are not bound by whatever fights are coming up this weekend on Bellator, the UFC, Glory, whatever, although Gokhan Saki's fighting this weekend, which is pretty exciting. We are not bound by whatever's in the news. We don't have to get out the hottest take. We don't have to argue and have conflict about it, and in hopes of getting clicks and likes. We just hang out for fun, and whoever wants to join us does. And that's been good. It's been good, guys. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. This has been. I'm enjoying the freestyle. You know, we're just kind of flowing with it all.
Yep, it's
I
true.
believe you're saying we're being like water. If hey, which is another Bruce Lee quote. And the great thing about that, there it is. T-shirt shout out to a cowboy for myself today.
Shout out to Roots of Fight.
We will bring on my friend David Mullins. I don't know if Rich has met Mullins. Mallory, you have.
Yes, I have.
Rich, David Mullins is a sports psychology consultant. He worked a lot with John Kavanaugh, who's a very good friend of yours. They worked together a lot, especially in the earlier days. So, yeah, we'll have a lot in common. We will definitely bring Mullins on. Here's some things. We can talk about whatever we want. We can deviate from everything that we're discussing. But here's some things we will discuss. I think – so, actually, let's start here. We were talking about this last week. We never got to it. Are there better fighters in Dagestan than there are in Brazil? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, this is one of those things. Remember last week you said, Robin, we're not going to be too controversial. And I said, can't promise that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make that guarantee.
Yeah.
This is a topic. This is a topic that will get some people fired up. It's a fun one. And this came about from your topic of, it's a spinoff of your topic of kind of the regional flavors and different regions, different parts of the world having different styles that they either created or in the case of jiu-jitsu, for example, in Brazil, it was from Japan, but they took it, made it their own, improved upon it. And it's led us to this, who is the global superpower of the martial arts of unarmed combat.
We used the words flavors, but we could have used textures. We could have used musical sounds, because Cuban music is quite different than Spanish music, although there is a relationship to it. Mexican food is quite different than food from Peru, although there are connections. And then you get into other things. Chinatown in Toronto is very different than China, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, this will be an extension of that. While we're on the topic of countries and who's good and who's not, how are we going to test that? We should have maybe the Olympics, right? Tease, the very first Olympics, the very first Olympian basically had MMA in it, right?
Yeah.
We can allow that to let us think about the future, although very difficult. This is something we're definitely going to talk about in the next 10 or 15 minutes, because our friend Dan Lambert is going to join us. The relationship between pro wrestling and MMA. Rich, this is something you're really into.
Yeah, and again, another topic that I do feel that some people out there will find a bit controversial, or just strongly have an opinion on, because a lot of the hardcores don't want to have anything to do with pro wrestling. But we'll talk about that.
Yes, we will.
We'll get into it more. But you guys know what I'm. You're picking up what I'm putting down, I imagine.
Yes, Mal, have you? So one of the reasons, when we were talking about getting together every week, we were like, hey, Black Belt Magazine, Facebook and YouTube. might be interested in having a stream where we're like, man, we were all obsessed with that when we were kids. That's where that's when, teenage us started to consume ideas about martial arts. And Black Belt Magazine's super like modern now. But we got some old. Mal, you want to give us a tease about a couple of things?
A little tease of this is one with this is definitely within your wheelhouse, Rich, and it is something we talked about. I think our second episode. It was called Jiu-Jitsu: The Complete Art. And it is a great breakdown. It's a really interesting article. Comes to us from Black Belt Magazine, 1980, August edition, in terms of one of the very first places that the word jiu-jitsu was used that I can find so far in Black Belt Magazine. I'm pretty sure I've skipped over a few years for flavor and everything, but this is an interesting article, and it breaks down. It goes through historical information about jiu-jitsu, and it's just chock full of just good stuff.
But now this is 40 years ago. It's one of the things that got us, again, very kind of excited about the idea early of, hey, let's go back at things that were written by people on the front end of martial arts in like 1978, in this case, 1980, and see what people were thinking, what's right, what's even more true today, what's less relevant, etc. That I suspect that's Japanese jiu-jitsu we're talking about.
Correct.
And there was a lot of Japanese jiu-jitsu actually in Winnipeg, Canada, and Quebec, Canada, when I was growing up. So this is actually something hopefully we'll get to. If we don't get to it next week, perpetual improvement. I put in brackets the Canelo question. This kid, Bo Templin is his name. He's a content creator. He's a young guy. He covers like all sports, basketball and football and boxing and fighting. And he is not an expert, and he doesn't complain to be, doesn't pretend to be. But he asks good questions because he's very curious, and he doesn't overstate his own knowledge. So he was asking me about why certain guys that are amazing, like say Canelo, Michael Jordan, whatever, why they can continue to improve and others hit a plateau. And that's, to me, a fascinating question.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, it's a cool question. And then maybe we'll talk about Gokhan Saki. Rich actually brought him up. He is fighting this weekend, coincidentally, and that's partly why when Rich brought him up, I was like, man, I'm literally working on a breakdown for Glory for him right now. So where do you guys want to start? Dan Lambert will be here probably in about 7 or 8 minutes. So we'll be talking about pro wrestling and MMA. Why don't we just get dark and dirty right early and say what country has the best fighters? You guys, anyone start us off?
Oh, how to begin this without being a homer for the country that you live in? I'm gonna go. Man, it's funny because as soon as it's almost like moving in chess. It's like I want to move forward, but wait, he might do this, or we might come on that.
Well, you don't have to answer the question. You can explore the question more deeply.
Why don't we go ahead and explore it by let's just throw a country out there and let's start getting some names out. Why not start with since we mentioned Kavanaugh before? Let's start with Ireland. You have a limited supply, I think, of well-known names, so you can mention one.
You guys got to discuss amongst yourself. My doctor's calling. 1 second.
All right, you can mention one, which would be Connor, and then there's definitely some up and comers and everything. But however, I think that there's an argument to carry that forward for Ireland, and there's a lot of unknowns. Just like we talked about, the best guy in the dojo sometimes is not the one that's winning the belt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a country that has a deep tradition of combat. They're just a country that loves to fight, and I think that's a great starting point. Identifying those countries that have this rich history of fighting. Sometimes it comes from political conflict. And that's what kind of made guys tough. I could say that kind of crosses over into Russia. And there's also been cycles of this, right? Like
correct.
Countries have come in and dominated. I think right now we're seeing Russia kind of be in the forefront. They're the talk kind of the sport right now, but in the past it was Brazilians and then Americans. And so I think the only way to settle it would be, yeah, to have some type of competition, right?
Right, which leads us to the MMA, to the Olympics. But going back to your thought on Brazil, at one time for the UFC, I think almost every major belt was held by a Brazilian.
Yeah.
I think it was Aldo. Aldo, let's see, I'm trying to remember for lightweight. I think lightweight might not have been, but you had Silva up there in the middle, and then you had, it was just, you looked, and Brazil, the Brazilian flag was on every single attached belt title before they had there, which leads to be a great argument for Brazil. But they also, there's a wave and a cycle where at one time everything was held over there, and then and at one point none.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The only way, I think, well, I shouldn't say the only way, but a great way to settle it, would be to have some, obviously competition and some type of, Olympic kind of international competition would be a lot of fun. Can you imagine that?
Well, one, the pressure, because already within Olympic sport, for competing in the Olympics, there's a lot of national pride that is on the back of the pressure. We've heard athletes talk about it this year. Some other athletes are coming out and saying, "Man, I felt the pressure of the world. The better I got, the more medals I got, the more pressure I experienced."
Right.
To carry the entire weight of a nation on your back for swimming or track and everything is one, but when you're fighting another human being, it seems much greater.
Can you imagine the amount of pride? Like this could very well take over and be the most important sport and competition in the whole games from a patriotic standpoint, right? Of like, all right, does my country have the toughest, the best fighters, or the fastest man, or the fastest swimmer? The average person might take more pride in knowing their country has the best fighters in the world. I don't know.
There will definitely be some chest pumping out and everything else about being proud to be whatever your nationality is there. This is something I looked at during the times of the Olympics. I found something on YouTube that had all for sprinters, from records that went back as far as the first Olympiad. They were just written, and then they actually had this for as we started coming up through the years. And one of the things I found was interesting, they had this like a camera on this giant stopwatch, because I was wondering, like, here we got digital timing and everything. You can get down to the microsecond to determine first and second place. And a lot of time it is that small of a difference. But they would actually have a camera there that they would look, and they would be able to tell, 1 and 1/10, et cetera, et cetera. But to go back to the medals there, where you had, I think, USA for a long time, then someone from England cracked the top 3, and then someone else. And then, like, if you go all the way back to modern times, you got to go through Jamaica now to get through a faster sprinter.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with fighting.
Yeah. The sports, MMA is truly global. I think it's one of those sports out there. I mean, look, everyone in the world can run, right? It's just one of those things. That's why I think the fastest man in some ways is more impressive, or the fastest human is more impressive than the best swimmer, because not every country, not everyone can swim, but everyone in the world can run, right? It's kind of this natural thing. But yeah, it's to throw out another country or region that doesn't get talked about often, but that is really like, now is kind of their time, their moment, this kind of breakthrough. Africa.
Yes, Africa definitely.
Francis Ngannou,
Rosenstrike. One of the things that I wanted to mention, I was fortunate enough to go to that event. It was in DC, real easy for me to get to, and I had 2 sets of tickets. I had bought some tickets, then I found a friend that actually had some friends in the UFC, and he left me tickets. His tickets were better than mine, so I took his and gave my friends the other ones. But I was sitting right next to the entire. I'm trying to Rosenstrike. I'm trying to remember where he's from. The name is escaping me right now. But it was the section where everyone was there. They had their flags, and we were there with the people, and they were loving everything. And if you remember that fight, the fight was pretty bad for 5 rounds and 4 minutes and 50 seconds for them, and then boom, it got great. But speaking of that, so you have Francis Ngannou. You can say Kamaru Usman has a good, legitimate line to that.
Those guys are repping their countries, like where Usman grew up in America, right? But His parents
of Nigerian descent.
from Nigeria. Yeah.
And the thing is, I think that we're finally seeing that entry market for fighters that can, probably with a little help, you got to get noticed and everything else. And if they live in in one of the many countries of Africa, they could get some eyes on them and come on out. And it's definitely their time to shine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just this is big. This opens up the whole world because as we just mentioned, the whole world doesn't play everything or isn't, is not active in all these sports. But I think the two sports, I've said it before, as far as outside of running and swimming, but everyone in the world knows soccer and fighting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's safe to say.
While we do have Robin that is out taking a quick phone call, we do have our guest, Dan Lambert, that has joined us right now. So we'll bring Dan in. Dan, my name is Mallory Woods. Welcome to the show. This is Rich Chow. Robert had to get a quick phone call.
Rich, I know well. How are you?
Yeah, what's up, man?
I'm good. All good. Up in Auburn visiting my daughter probably for the last time in college. So last kid getting ready to graduate. Life's good.
Oh, exciting.
Man, getting that last kid out and everything, you got to be relaxed. You got to be, thinking this is a good thing.
Change the locks on the front door and wish him well.
There you go.
What is happening?
We can hear you, Robin. You got us?
Yeah, sorry. I just had a call from my doctor. I got a weird thyroid thing from head trauma, actually. And he checked out all my levels, and apparently I'm healthy, which...
Hey, good news. We'll celebrate that good news. Well, yeah, right in the past, the last couple seconds, Dan joined us, so I figured no reason to keep him in the waiting room.
Dan Lambert, how the hell are you?
Instead of going to the doctor after the fact, you should have gone to a boxing coach prior to and avoided
that's good advice right there.
That is so true. Did you guys start chatting about how... By the way, Jake Hager just texted me. Should we invite him?
Who?
Jake Hager.
You think his head, Dan Lambert? You think his bucket head would even fit on the screen?
I'm going to tell him you just said that. You guys talk amongst yourselves. I'll invite Mr. Hager.
Well, Dan, we were just discussing best country. Which country has the best fighters? We were talking about Africa. We've mentioned Ireland. We haven't covered the United States and everything. This is supposed to be a non-controversial show, but however, when you mention a topic like that, you're going to get some controversy. What would you like to add to this?
I 10 years ago, I probably would have had a different answer than I do now. Mm-hmm. And I would have had a different answer as to what background you want from a fighter, what discipline he comes from. But these days, it's like, just give me the best athlete. I don't care what the hell his background is. I don't care what his discipline he came from. I don't care what country he came from. Give us the best, most athletic guy, because the quality of training is getting so good and the quality of fighting is getting so good the way the sport's evolved. The better athlete's going to win more often than not because they're all going to be well trained and well prepared.
I mean, it makes so what you're saying is, doesn't matter what food you ate, what God you praise, what language you speak. It's what your physical body can do.
I mean, at this point, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it was different because there were just different levels to this shit, as people like to say. Mm-hmm. Now there's like one level, and it's really high, or you're not going to get to these big shows. These guys at these good shows, they're all going to be good. They're all going to be well trained. They're all going to be ready. They're all going to be tough for the most part. And when you get guys that are somewhat similar in skill, the better athlete's going to win.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, how back in the day, it was just tough guys, right? You were just tough. And now, we have real athletes, guys that could probably play other sports and do other things, do a variety of things. But it's evolved a lot from tough guys to, world-class athleets.
Yeah. So
and who has the worst? What country has the worst fighters then?
Here's what I'm going to say on that. I'm going to say the greatest fighter in my gym right now is from Japan, and the worst fighters as a whole come from Japan because they're the least athletic. And you can call me whatever you want. They're smarter than we are, but for the most part, they're less athletic.
So first of all, thank you for not saying Canada. Secondly, the best fighter in your gym. Are you talking about Horiguchi?
I'm talking about Horiguchi, and I didn't know people from Canada fought, so I may have considered them otherwise.
Yeah, they're very nice people.
And the best fighter in the world is from Canada. George is better than Horiguchi.
Right now? Okay, where do I put some money on that one?
Fair enough.
And speaking of Horiguchi, just announced his fight today, right? So we're excited about that.
Right.
Pettis coming up in Bellator. So yeah, he's a special fighter.
Yeah.
He is. And the world's about to find out.
That's that like Mike and all your guys are super excited about it. And Duke and all those guys are really excited about the test for Sergio for sure. Like everybody will be pumped to be involved in this.
Yeah, and Sergio, the confidence coming out of our side has nothing to do with Sergio, because Sergio is really good, and I think he showed how good he was in that fight with Archuleta, because Archuleta is a real explosive guy, good cardio, comes to fight, and Sergio kind of picked him apart.
He did. That was interesting. So actually, it's funny you mention that. I've been thinking about that fight a lot when people. So to the average, you guys tell me what you think about this. One of the popular things to talk about or observe or feel like you're watching is feints, right? Whether you're a big fan of Stylebender or whomever, this idea of feints is a really kind of big talking point narrative. But a feint is not some automatic tool that automatically works, right? Sergio's entire game was, I'm just not going to respond to anything that isn't real. You know what I mean? Rich, you were probably right there for that fight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Sergio literally, the key thing was don't bite on everything, or don't bite on almost anything until it becomes the point that it is real. And that's a skill too. People talk about feint, and I hear this all the time, and I'm not trying to be rude to any coach out there that's ever done this, but when you hear somebody yelling more feints, listen, more shitty feints is not going to make anything better. Right? If your feints are failing or they're not getting the other person to bite, just doing more of them is not going to in any way make this scenario better for you.
I think that actually reflects very well on Sergio's confidence in his striking and his reflexes, because when you tell yourself going in, I'm not biting for any of that shit until it gets real dangerous, you're putting yourself at risk. And man, every time Archuleta got into that danger zone, it looked like Sergio had an answer for it. So props to that guy.
Yeah. Totally cool. Okay, I didn't hear from Jake Hager, but if he pops in, I'm just putting his bucket head right next to you. But let's talk about.
Come on, Jake. You can't be scared of Dan. Come on.
He just texted me, so and he might. I mean,
I'm not saying he's afraid of me. I'm saying he's afraid of the backup I always bring with me.
Yeah, that's right. So let's talk about that, Dan. You own an MMA gym. MMA's been like, a big focus of your life and your business life and your personal life and your entertainment life and your passions and stuff for decades now. But you get smashed through the mat on AEW every week now, it seems. What is the connection between these two?
I didn't know what MMA was till I was trading tapes with some guys in the late 80s over in Japan, and I was sending them copies of VHS tapes from the United States, and they were sending me Japanese shows until they slipped them some. I guess it was probably a pancreas tape back then. If it was the early 90s, may have been a UWFI show. And I'm like, man, what is this stuff? What are these arm locks? What are these rope breaks for submissions? I don't know what any of this shit is. And it got me interested into it. And then when the UFC popped up, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So wrestling's got a special place in my heart.
Yeah, it's your first love, right, Dan? Is that safe to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think for many, although not everyone likes to admit it, it was their first love. Now the hardcore fans want nothing to do with pro wrestling. They don't really know the history and the lineage and the tradition. They don't know that pro wrestling and MMA are actually related, right?
So I was one of those guys. So when I was a little kid, I liked
cousin.
Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
I was just saying, absolutely related, and probably a little closer related than first cousins. If wrestling and MMA were going to have a kid, he'd probably have 6 fingers on a hand.
When I was a little kid, I liked pro wrestling. Most little kids do, but as a teenager, doing martial arts and competing and fighting and stuff, and then an adult, I hated it. But I worked at a place called Fight Network, and it was a 24-hour fighting TV channel. And my friend John Ramdeen really loved old Pancrase, and so he started building these old compilations. We called it the best of Pancrase, and we did like 130 episodes of them, including the first ones, and many of them had never been called in English. And so when you go back to the beginning, Funaki and Suzuki literally were pro wrestling lovers who were like, we're just gonna do it real. Like, their version of MMA was pro wrestling that was actual competition. And when you look at it from that, and it's open hands at first, and it's like physical wrestling with old school submissions, and it's so cool. And when you connect the dots back to them and the early Pancrase, I'm sorry, I have a lisp. I don't know if you ever noticed. It is like inarguable that they are connected on that sort of in that moment.
Did you break down Frank Shamrock and Alan Goez?
Is that where there are some suplexes that he just keeps picking him up, and you're like, wait a second, oh, some of these were works? Is that?
I think they were playing a football game, and then they just started slapping the shit out of each other in the face, sitting down, looking at each other. Awesome. Yes. It's been 20 years since I saw it.
Yeah, we did do that. Yeah, great. We did do that. We did commentate that one, and in fact, you're right. And that's where it's all of a sudden crossing too. It's like they're now entertaining. So they're fighting and they're competing and they're hitting each other, but they're not sort of neglecting entertainment. In fact, it's becoming an irreversible wind within it. And that's a big part of fighting today. No doubt about it. The audience demands it. And that sense of play is present.
Yeah, the whole shoot style, right? And you just mentioned that Japan getting those tapes back in the day. That's really the roots of MMA in several ways. The whole shoot style. I mean, when you look at the foundation of, like, for example, Pride, it was Takada, pro wrestler, against Hickson. And then the greatest rivalry at that time, it became Sakuraba, pro wrestler, against the Gracies. That was the foundation of Pride. That was the big thing going on in Japan and in the MMA world at the time, rooted in pro wrestling. And then you go to the UFC, all those early guys, Shamrock, Severn, Tank, they all ended up in the WWE at some point, or, doing pro wrestling at some point. So,
well, one thing, pro wrestling seems to be able to generate a lot of emotion from people. Maybe it's due to interviews or Sorry.
I mean, the fans are actually part of the show in pro wrestling, which something pretty cool.
Dan, you offend them, and you seem to take joy in it.
Oh, I take a lot. When you get to go at people and say a lot of things that you really believe, it makes it more comfortable, and it really makes it come off more authentic. You're saying a lot of shit you believe, and my goal when I walk out there is make them hate me as much as I hate them. So I'm having a blast.
I believe you. That's the weird thing. This isn't a character. You're not just staying in character. Like, you actually do hate a lot of these people in the audience. You do find them ridiculous. You do want to provoke these humans.
Yeah, this is a shoot, not a work, right, Dan?
Yeah, the best works are the ones that have some elements of a shoot in them.
Yeah, so
it must be really fun.
So for all the hardcore MMA fans out there that want to have nothing to do with pro wrestling, the guys that I'm talking about. Oh, I hate pro wrestling. It's fake. Shit is fake. This and that. I mean, the sport you love, MMA, is heavily rooted in pro wrestling. Sorry, guys.
I mean, there's factions of wrestling fans, faction of pro wrestling fans who hate MMA. There's big factions of MMA fans that hate pro wrestling, and there's a cross section that likes both. But I will tell you one thing: if you're a longtime fan of professional wrestling dating back to before there was MMA, and you followed and tracked the history of the business, you see so many parallels between what goes on in MMA and what has already gone on in professional wrestling. And I'm talking promotional wars. I'm talking talents. I'm talking about guys with certain types of shticks that get over versus don't over fans. And watch things over the last 25 years go on in MMA, and I'm sitting back thinking, wow, this 1983 back in XYZ territory. I've already seen it. I know how it's gonna turn out, and invariably it does. And there are differences between the two businesses.
So it's funny. We've talked a lot about sort of the cycles of martial arts. Certain things don't work, certain things do work, certain things are not believed and everyone does them. And then things that people forget become big again. But what you're saying is literally the same discussion, but in business and in promotion and in entertainment. It's that same cycle of predictability that we see.
A lot of parallels.
Yeah, it's wild. I was watching some bare knuckle, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and there was a shot of the promoter sitting at the desk with the commentator and a legendary fighter, and they were talking about all the new territories that are finally getting legislation and open up, and how they're expanding worldwide, the fastest growing sport. And I looked and I'm like, I just saw this in 1999, 2000, 2001. Only that was Dana White, and that was, Goldberg, and that was whatever. And before that, you saw that with, pro wrestling in Japan or whatever. Like, we just see the same cycles, the same stories, the same challenges, the same resolutions, just over and over and over again, just different players.
Promotion. UFC fighting against other promotions, trying to block TV time, pay-per-view blocks, relationships between the promoters and fighters, what you've seen happen between Dana and like a Tito or over the years. You'd already seen that with Vince McMahon and, fill in the blank, several times over the years. And you see how it plays out. You see the big falling out. Then you see like a year later, they can make money together. And then all of a sudden they're friends again. There's just so many parallels. People, are talent disputes, argue for money.
I want to stay in there for a second. Let's see if you
can Dan froze for a second. Dan's using Wi-Fi from the old Pancrase age era. He's using Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Well, here's one question for you.
I think I'm losing you guys a little bit. I got a bad feed.
Yeah, I think you're back. Ish.
You're back.
Yeah. So we'll come back to this too. But also,
Robin, real quick before we move on, just one little note, one little anecdote here on this pro wrestling and MMA topic. I get asked a lot, what's a fight that got away that I've worked on, that I was a part of, that we worked on, that I wish we could have put on, but for whatever reason it fell through. And it is the one that always
how's that work?
Top of my, there you go.
There we go.
To the top of my to the top of my mind.
I'm back here.
Is a fight we tried to make not that long ago. I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it was Kurt Angle versus Hoist Gracie. Ooh. We actually had this discussion. And it's one, Dan, I was just telling the guys, I get asked a lot, what are some of the ones that got away, right? That you wish you could have put on, that you wish you could have put together. And that's definitely, if not at the top of the list, it's certainly up there and, in the mix. But yeah, Kurt Angle versus Hoist Gracie, there was an actual negotiation that went on, and, we had some conversations with both sides, and it fell through at the end of the day. But man, that would have been a fun one, wouldn't you say, boys?
You could have charged $400 on that pay-per-view. I would have paid it. I don't know how many else people would, but there's certainly been some fights. Somebody asked me the other day, what are some fights that got away that you would have loved to have seen happen? And I was always stuck when Randy was the champion and Brock was there. I would have loved to have seen Randy fight Fedor.
Yep.
And if Fedor had won, then had Brock turn babyface and go after Fedor. And I'm thinking, I mean, just what would have been better than that? Fedor, the evil Russian cyborg, comes in and beats the shit out of Captain America, takes the UFC title from Mother Russia, and here comes the Beast coming in, who everybody hates going into it. Now he turns face and
instant
Brock
baby
gets Fedor.
face.
Come on.
That almost writes itself.
It does.
It's you would see Brock coming in. Most people, they want to boo him because he's wrestling comes in, and instantly you're 100% Brock fan right then and there. And you don't really see that many switches in terms of obviously they do it in professional wrestling. You're going to be a heel. You're going to be a heel. Okay, we're going to turn your baby face. But instant switches just like that, and I could see that happening. I could actually see like everyone be on Brock's side. We want to see you beat Fedor, this, that, and the other. And another charge $400 pay-per-view that I would have probably thrown my money at easily.
Yeah, the more over you are as a baby face or a heel, the more effective your turn's going to be.
Yeah.
And Brock was over strong as a heel. If he had gone good guy against a Fedor, it would have been huge. It's like Sergeant Slaughter turning baby face to fight the Iron Sheik.
There's something about this conversation that actually is just starting to like bother me. Like there's something about it. Like, wait a second, this is going too far now. And I'm sitting here listening to you guys. And you guys are beaming and just loving it. And I'm like, what about this is starting to bother me? And I realize I hate knowing that I'm being manipulated. I'm knowingly going with a manipulation. Mm-hmm. There's something about that I fucking hate.
But it's easy to get carried away. You just get carried right away with it.
Robin, you're buddies with Punk, right? With CM Punk.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you gotta.
Yeah, he's damn good at what he does, man. He is damn good at what he does. While we're at it, while we're just making up banners to say stuff, whatever anybody ever wants to say about this guy. I mean, first of all, one of the most powerful things on earth in life that you can do is learn to not care about the opinions of others. It's a long, challenging practice, but if you can achieve it or some semblance of it, because you're not going to be able to have it all the time. Sometimes you're going to wake up grumpy and be like, fuck, I'm so angry that this person said or did this thing. But if you can achieve it, you can do great things. The people who will mock this guy for the 2 fights that he had, they don't understand how far you have to surpass the challenges and setbacks and fears that most people would quit to get to a point that you can lose a fight in a cage. That's the crazy thing when we're sitting there judging someone. I saw people pointing at Nick Diaz and saying he was a quitter. You know what I mean? If you can't comprehend how many times you have to not quit where 99.9% of the earth quits to get far enough to surrender in a cage fight or to actually put yourself into one at the expense of being made fun of by the masses. And that's why you got to respect CM Punk. It's like he did it. And he got punched in the face a hell of a lot. And he still did it. And I'll always respect that.
It's not for everybody.
No, and most can't and won't do it. But you know what I mean? Did you guys happen to pick up on that? Not that it matters, and not that life is about wondering why humans do shit. Because most of us disagree with half of them. I'm not American, you three are, but if I was, and I'm not speaking for you guys, but I think Dan Lambert disagrees with 50% of America right now. I think that's probably fair, and I think that's fair for almost everybody. It's like half of the people I disagree with you. And that's okay, but so it makes no sense to try to figure out how and why people are behaving the way they are. But despite having said that, when I saw people calling Nick Diaz a quitter, I was like, do they not understand what they can learn about their own life by Nick Diaz going so far that he eventually surrendered in a fight? Do you know what I mean? Am I talking crazy?
Not to me, you're not.
No. And I've said this before, fellas. The world would be a better place if everyone trained and understood. For several reasons. I think you would learn a level of humility and gain some knowledge about this stuff that would give you a different perspective. Going back to Punk, I respect anyone that gets in there, the ring, the cage, and goes for it, puts it on the line. Didn't work out, wasn't for him, but he had the balls to step up, and put his reputation on the line. So you got to respect the man despite the result.
Agreed.
And you said the world would be a better place. The world would be a better place if people got out and actually trained. I agree with that. And I'll just add to it. If they don't want to train, if that other 50% that Robin was alluded to would come out of mom's basement and get punched in the face once in their life or saying some shit they say from down there, would probably be a better place too.
Goes hand in hand. It goes hand in hand.
Yeah, it really does. But I'll add this to CM Punk's story too. We will often, perhaps incorrectly, say, and Rich, you just said it, and I know what you mean. And how you are saying it is different than how a lot of other people. They'll say anybody who steps in the cage, you got to respect them. Yes, but respect you infinitely more when you lose the first one and do it again. That's 1,000. Yeah. You may be 1 in 1,000 to do it, but 1 in 1,000 of those who get wiped out on TV will do it again. That's even tougher. And then take the failure, work on it, use it to drive yourself to try to get better, strive with everything you have to try it again, and then still fail. That's an incredible amount of will and skill and desire, and most people don't have that. They just don't.
I'll say this:
losing a fight is tough.
You bring up CM Punk. I think CM Punk is a fucking stud. The guy goes at a late age, having never trained mixed martial arts, not being the most athletic guy to begin with. Now he's old and his body is ravaged from all those years of professional wrestling, because that thing takes a toll on your body like nothing else in the world. And he's going to go out there and get into a cage and not only fight, he's going to go in there and get into a cage and a fight with a monster name and a monster reputation and a lot of eyeballs on him, praying that he fails so they can shit on him. And he still has the balls to go and do it, not once but twice. So that guy's a stud. Not to mention that he was making millions of dollars doing his other job, and he gave it up.
We are in a society where everyone loves to record and point and laugh when someone trips or when someone falls and when someone fails. And what does that teach us? To never try. And that means life's going to get pretty boring around here if we all are too scared to, go for our dreams or do something like that. So to go on a stage like that, to try, we saw the result that he did not succeed. But that effort before there, like you were mentioning, Robert, the learning, the constant willing to submit yourself to say, I need to learn this new skill and I'm going to dedicate myself to do it. I think if I remember right, when we had Duke on before, he was saying that he comes in and he learns everything. He was just working so hard at building this skill set. And just as you mentioned, Dan, late in life, how many of us are going to attempt a radical career change that late?
And sometimes you try and sometimes you fail. You try really hard and you don't make it. And that's a part of life. And it's an okay part of life. It fucking makes you tougher and able a little more connected to the reality of the world that most people aren't. And if you're sitting around mocking people for what they are doing or mocking people because of fail or ridicule, what you're doing is reinforcing in your own mind that you shouldn't try. Because if you do and you fail, you will be ridiculed by idiots like you, right? And you actually, by sitting around mocking people who try and fail, you harm your own future. And most people don't realize that. But while we're talking about
do all that, not only did he do all that, try and eventually fail and try again and fail again, he's still there. He still goes to Duke's a lot and trains. So the guy hasn't even given up on getting better at what he gave a very short try at before actually getting into the cage. I mean, how many people are going to go train for 6 months or 8 months and then get into a cage? It's kind of ridiculous to begin with, but he's still doing it, trying to get better. The guy's a stud in my book.
Well, ultimately, something we talk about whenever we get together on Wednesdays, and probably we'll talk about for much as long as we ever do this, is if you like something like, say, martial arts, you can train it for the rest of your life. Dan, who's the oldest person in your gym?
Say again?
Who's the oldest person that you see? I know you're all pro fighters now, but when you when you were not all pro fighters,
we had people in their 60s still come in there and train, and we had one guy who was a black belt in jiu-jitsu who was in his 70s.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. That'll be us if we're alive. While we're talking about studs, who's been exposed to this guy ever? Rich, have you ever trained with him or met him, or do you know Gokhan Saki?
I have spent some time with him. Really great guy. And you know how this conversation came about earlier, right? The pre-show, we were warming up. Robin and Mallory is. I'll break kayfabe here since we're talking wrestling this episode. I'll break kayfabe for a minute. I was chatting with Mick Maynard over on the other side over at the UFC, and we were talking about Saki briefly. About, you know, he came out and said, my body, I just couldn't do MMA, right? I don't know if you guys saw that, where he said my body just wasn't ready. I just couldn't, you know, he didn't have success in MMA. Uh-huh. And Mick and I were, you know, we exchanged some thoughts on how mind-blowing that is when you look at this guy kickbox and you're like, holy shit, this is just an absolute beast, right? Just, you would think the transition would have been successful. And for him to come out and say, yeah, I just couldn't, my body couldn't handle it. It's, to me, that's mind-blowing when you take these guys that are so good at what they do and just, you know, struggle in the MMA world.
I mean, it's the sports are different. I mean, you see Marilla Bustamante taking down Matt Lindland, you know, in their fight, not for too far removed from Lindland medaling in the Olympics. You know, I'll give you a modern day example. We have a guy who's now 1-0 in MMA training at our gym, Buchecha. And the guy is an 8-time world champion. Prior to Gordon Ryan coming around, this guy was the greatest heavyweight grappler I had ever seen in my life, most accomplished, certainly. And he comes to the gym and says, I want to do MMA. And, you know, in this new post-COVID world or current COVID world that we're in, we're pretty selective with who we allow in the gym and not in the gym these days. And he reached out and he wanted to come and train. I'm thinking, this guy can come to our gym tomorrow and start training full time, even if he never fights a day in his life. Who doesn't want a guy like him in our gym, if nothing else, to give the look of being a monster, strong, big dude who can do what he can do on the ground to the other fighters? So he came and he started training. And I saw he did an interview with Flow Grappling, and they were asking him about the transition. And the first thing he said was, I had no idea how much my jiu-jitsu sucked. I thought I was so good in jiu-jitsu. Now I'm in here getting punched in the face, and all the stuff that I used to try and do successfully against the best grapplers in the world is no longer working because these guys are punching me in the face. And I've got to totally rework and rethink my whole approach to MMA through a jiu-jitsu lens. I have to change what I think I can do and can't do in jiu-jitsu, much less what I now have to learn to do MMA. And the guy had no ego, and he was quick to say it. And he said, man, I realize that. I acknowledge that. I recognize it. And he's adapted his game. He spends a lot of time striking. He's got a monster set of balls because he's going in there taking beatings every day and just trying to get better. And I think he's going to be really good. He had his first fight for ONE FC recently, first round submission. The guy's a beast. But the thing that impressed me the most about him was just his ability to let the ego go away and realize what does and doesn't work jiu-jitsu wise in the world of MMA. So, you know, it's not surprising to me. And I know Saki's issue may have been more physical than anything else, but it doesn't surprise me at all when you see world-class wrestlers come in and fail, world-class grapplers come in and fail, world-class strikers come in and fail. Man, it's best tennis player in the world doesn't mean he's going to be good at ping pong.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, or badminton or whatever. Yeah, that's really, really true. You know, I was training today with Coach Evan Boris. He's a coach up here that I train with a lot, and we were talking about this very thing. And do you guys know Fernand Lopez? Fernand is from France. Fernand was what's his name? The UFC heavyweight champion. What's his name?
Ngannou?
You know, yeah, Francis. I have a thing with names. It's back to the head trauma. Francis Ngannou, and then the interim champion is also Cyril. Yeah,
Shogun.
So, thank you, Cyril. So he still trains Cyril. He is Cyril's coach. He was Francis's coach, and Francis left him at one point through whatever scenario. And Cyril talks about when he would get these athletes that can do one or another thing. Of course, yes, we are training them to defend takedowns, to wrestle, to grapple, to do jiu-jitsu. But first we got to modify what they do already because that thing doesn't work in and of itself. And I heard Greg talking about this with Clarissa Shields. I did a thing on SportsCenter about her. And truthfully, and Coach Evan and I were talking about this today. If we would want her to never throw a right hand, right? We're going to throw a jab and move our feet, and throw a jab and move our feet, and throw a jab and move our feet. We don't want her to box. We want her to do that, because if she boxes and gets into this territory, she'll be taken down. So it isn't to just sort of add that onto what Dan's saying. It isn't just we got to learn the other stuff. The thing you've already mastered isn't your mastery of it isn't relevant here in the way it used to be relevant.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean the guys, what's interesting is, it's not like, who's a kickboxer that I've worked with that is a total stud and couldn't make Joe Schilling. These guys, they were getting taken down and submitted. They were getting knocked out. Saki got knocked out. So that's the thing. It's like you wouldn't expect that. You would think, all right, someone's going to take him down, ground and pound him, or submit him. No, these guys got knocked out. Yeah. But if you put bigger gloves on and put them in a ring, right, the outcome would be very different. Just all the variables, everything coming together. It just, they weren't as effective as some people thought they would be. Dan, you said you weren't surprised. I still get surprised sometimes. You just think they're in the right environment. It's they're going to transition, and then not as far as kickboxers, not everyone. I mean, who are some of the most successful? Like a Crow Cop, probably, right?
Overeem.
Yeah, Overeem.
Yeah, Overeem. Saki Gokhan, fortunately, is fighting kickboxing in Glory this weekend. So we get to see him do the thing that he's a master of, which is the way we want it, right? When I go, I'm doing a breakdown of him, and I have a whole bunch of his fights. And the challenge is trying to do only a minute and a half, because there's so much cool shit. He's landing 5 and 6 punch combinations on professional kickboxers. But when you're fighting in an MMA fight, I can't do that. The guy's going to grab my thigh or my body lock, and I'm going to be in trouble. It is a fascinating thing. But when you really think about it, so if we remove the words we use, wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu, whatever, and then we think about what it really is, the dynamic of what fighting is revolves around what you can do and what you cannot do and what the parameters are. It's 5 minutes long. Rounds are 5 minutes. Cages are shaped this way. The space is this big. Here's all the stuff you can do. Here's all the stuff you can't do. We say boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, but we shouldn't be saying that anymore, because that's not really true, right? There are ways we can train certain things in certain environments with specialists, but MMA isn't boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and kickboxing. It isn't. And karate. It isn't. It's free fighting.
Yeah, the days of it being a boxer versus a grappler, they're just gone. I mean, these younger kids coming up, they're equally adept at everything. You ask some of these younger guys in my gym, like a Mosvar Evolov, who's a stud prospect at our gym. I think he's like 18-0 or 16-0 or something like that. He's 5-0 in the UFC. You ask him, what style are you? He's like, well, what do you mean? Well, what do you prefer, wrestling, kickboxing, grappling? What do you prefer? MMA. I do everything. What are you better at? Everything.
Yeah.
There were a couple names we missed in that that was mentioned. Adesanya, good transition over from kickboxing. Shicheka, completely unintentionally overlooking those two, but those. Yeah. I mean, and I know they came with their own struggles too. So it's
Valentina right now, man, of all the people in the world that I would least like to fight if they had a knife, especially would be Valentina. Like, she literally probably has killed a lot of people. Don't you think? Like, don't you think she's probably killed people?
I think there may be a body or two somewhere. I'd be with,
If the gun tattoo on the stomach is not a hint, there might be bad things coming your way. I don't know what is.
Yeah, isn't that like a hitman symbol? Isn't that a symbol of pride in that?
I think it's just don't look at me the wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's real, man. She's so real. Dan, this is something we've been doing. It's really fun. We got about 15 minutes. Mal, we pull out like old articles from things 40-ish years ago. And then we talk about like how relevant, and shockingly, a lot of them are far more relevant today than we thought they were 5 and 10 years ago. That there's this sort of old as new again kind of idea. So Mal, what do we got here?
So this one is from, let's see, I mentioned it before, Black Belt Magazine, August 1980. Okay. I'd like to think about what I was doing then, but we're not going to talk about age.
Yeah.
And this is a great article called Jiu-Jitsu: The Complete Art. Here they break down, they cover the roots of jiu-jitsu. They mention in feudal Japan, peasants were denied the use of weapons and consistency. They were at the mercy of samurai who were free to kill a peasant and his family for the slightest insults or merely to test the sharpness of a weapon. Jiu-jitsu was developed specifically for combat against weapons, which is one reason jiu-jitsu is still the predominant form of martial arts taught to military personnel and law enforcement officers. So this article, which I'll mention, it does and it goes and explains some of the origins of it, but also explains in comparison to karate or other styles.
So what's cool here, the author's opinion, many arts, jiu-jitsu was developed in what we now call China. You just zip back a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
And just a little bit in what we now call China. And though traveling monks and merchants ended up in Japan, like a lot of things, this can be substantiated by looking at any book on Kung Fu and noting how closely the arts of Jiu-Jitsu and Kung Fu resemble each other. The main difference is Chinese arts are taught in long forms. See, that's complete. That's an author who's sort of taking what he knows and trying to and believes that it's expertise. But there's many types of Chinese arts and there's many types of different types of Kung Fu and katas and individual techniques blend into both. But it's interesting because this was Japanese jiu-jitsu in 1980. But Rich, you were talking about the roots of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and that dates back to what did you say, the late 50s? Or
I'd say that's when Maeda went to Brazil and they picked it up. We spoke about this earlier on the show, the regional flavors, how different countries, they adopted jiu-jitsu, right? They took it and, in my opinion, improved upon it and turned it into something, that I think is amazing. That's the martial art that got me. I know, Dan, you love jiu-jitsu as well, right?
Absolutely. I would say that I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu for a long time. I love jiu-jitsu. And I would say the author who wrote that in the 80s, I don't think he was ever right when it comes to fighting weapons. I don't think outside of a movie, shit works against the weapon. But when he wrote that in the 80s, 10 years later, he was the smartest guy in the world because jiu-jitsu was beating the shit out of every other martial art in the early days of MMA. And now the guy looks a little bit foolish because, as much as I hate saying it, jiu-jitsu's really slipped in the hierarchy of important offensive positions or moves or disciplines in mixed martial arts. It's like, unless your last name is, Oliveira or maybe Ortega, not many guys are submitting guys from their. Early days of MMA proved the guy a genius. I mean, if it's art against art, jiu-jitsu won. It just did. And you didn't have to be the best jiu-jitsu guy or the most athletic jiu-jitsu guy. It was still beating everybody. Nowadays, not so much.
But the macro lesson that we take is that it wasn't about what jiu-jitsu was or is in comparison to something else. It's about the importance of, if I know something way more deeply than you do, and you don't understand it, that is always powerful. That will always be powerful. If I have knowledge that you don't, that I can use, that you don't understand, that in and of itself will always have power in combat, in many business, and many other areas of life.
Hoist Gracie proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. He wasn't an athletic dude. He wasn't a big, strong dude. And as most people over in Brazil will tell you at the time, he wasn't the jiu-jitsu guy over there. But he came over and got in the UFC and beat the shit out of everybody because he knew something they didn't. And his style was better on a style versus style basis.
If I can kind of take it back to when I was thinking, when I first saw that first UFC, and I have to apologize, I have a workman downstairs and my Jack Russell, the big scary dog, is trying to protect the house. So if you hear a few dog barks in here, please forgive me. But I remember we were watching this over a friend of mine's house. He had cable, and there's something called the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and they introduced that guy as something Gracie, and I'm like, that guy's way bigger. This is not even fair. 2 minutes later, I'm sitting there wondering what happened. What went on? Okay, well, and then he beat someone else, and he beat someone else. So just like a lot of Americans at that time, my eyes were completely open at what is this that he's doing, and how come he's beating a guy that is almost twice his size? He's a foot taller. He's an expert in kickboxing or whatever else you want to say.
Yeah,
and
sumo or whatever.
Sumo or a boxer with one glove. But that's classic UFC stuff. But my mind was blown completely, never having heard of this before and seeing it in action.
Yeah, it pissed us all off. We all liked whatever we were doing. If you were doing karate or taekwondo, and like you were cheering for that guy, and here's this little wimpy dude with a pajamas doing something to the guy's arm.
Right. Yeah. And I think that was like kind of a personal thing, because no matter what martial art you take, if you take it and you're looking up to your instructor, and maybe there's a guy that's won, a medal or something that goes to your school, and you're like, this is it. This is what will help protect me. And then a guy comes in and something you never heard of and mops the floor with what and you kind of are offended. It's tribal. It's kind of personal.
Yeah. The weird thing that actually also happened is it sort of misled things, because what Hoist would know against somebody that he would defeat, if you do know a lot of wrestling in high school or boxing or karate for that matter, and you are up against a cracked out, somebody who's trying to steal your mom's purse or your wife's purse, you do know as much more than him as Hoist knew than the other guy. Like it didn't render all other self-defense to be useless.
Inaccurate, right?
It didn't render all other types of training to have no value, but we thought it did. We thought that we got to do the thing that's the best now.
And then the tables got turned on jiu-jitsu down the road. And all of a sudden they got in there against better strikers who had a little bit of wrestling takedown defense. And then all of a sudden your hero jiu-jitsu coach that you thought was invincible and the best part of the world, all of a sudden now he's shooting double legs from 7 feet away, floundering on his butt scooting away. He's getting his ass beat. I mean, the sport changes.
Well, that's the beauty of it, is this evolution in 2021. You mentioned earlier, Dan, you're not seeing too many guys getting submitted in certain positions anymore. And I got to bring up, I'm not going to mention his name, but there's a guy that fought in Bellator a couple of years ago. We're buddies. I won't mention his name, but he got submitted. He tapped to an armbar from closed guard. And after the fight, I went to go see him. And of course I had to give him shit. I'm like, really, man? You know what I mean? Like, this guy's, I want to say he's almost a black belt, if not a black belt too, right, Dan? Like, that's just one of those things. Like, come on, dude, you got armbarred from the closed guard in 2020, 2021. Come on, that doesn't.
Yeah, you still see guillotines and footlocks. They're like the great equalizers, where a blue belt level guy can catch a black belt in it. You don't see as many arm bars and stuff. It's a little different when they're getting punched in the face, but for the most part, you're not seeing a higher level guy get arm barred from the closed guard.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So and I won't call him out like that, but I did give him some shit after I talked to him. It was okay, and then I had to. Yeah. And he was very embarrassed. He's like, dude, you're so right. Oh my God. I'm like, if you're a black belt, you better turn that thing in, because that's just not supposed to happen.
But it's a fight. It's happening fights that don't in the room.
Who was that UFC? He fought in the UFC quite a bit. He was actually married or living with Misha Tate at the time.
Brian Caraway?
Yeah.
Yes, Brian Caraway. Did he ever train at your gym, Dan?
No.
So Brian Caraway, and not to talk shit on somebody. I mean, he's better than me. But I do remember it was WEC, and Mark Hominick was a blue belt at the time. Mark Hominick submitted him with something, a triangle choke. And I think he went to guillotine, to a sort of a reaching sweep, a hip sweep, and Caraway pulled out and he threw the triangle in. And I remember he tapped him, and I remember, Mark's my friend, so I was happy for him. But I remember seeing an interview after, and Caraway was good about it. Like, he was like, "Damn, that's a blue belt trap." Like, and I got caught. Like, he got me. And he was embarrassed. But it's sometimes, like, we all do it. That's the thing. We all will lose focus for a second. Back in the day, if you lost focus while you were playing around with your lawnmower or whatever, off topic, but when I was a kid in my neighborhood, there were adults who were missing fingers, like a few of them, because back in the 60s, when they were working with tools, they lost fingers when they lost their focus, right? If you lose your focus at work, Rich, and you're talking to somebody on the phone and you're booking a fight or whatever, you're like, oh, fuck, I lost my focus. I mean, sorry, I'm just really tired. But if you lose your focus in a fight, you may get brain damage, and you'll be lucky you only got arm barred, or you're lucky you only got caught in a blue belt triangle setup. Those are good days
if you're
compared to how bad they could be.
If you're training in the gym on the mats and all you're thinking about is grappling and submissions and transitions and advancing positions, you're more than likely never gonna get caught in something like that by a lower level guy. But when you're in a fight, there's a million things going on. You're thinking about a lot more than just grappling, and shit happens.
That's right. That's right. And we all know that. The audience doesn't always know that, but which is why people feel embarrassed. But ultimately, your friend who got caught in an armbar, that shit happens. Like and that's the shitty part about a high-level professional performance. Like when you shit the bed at work, and we all do it on occasion, on rare occasion, it really doesn't affect us that much. But when you do it in the Super Bowl, or you do it in a professional fight, or you do it, on stage if you're Beyonce or whatever, it haunts you.
Yeah.
And obviously with everything being recorded today, it will continue to live on past your life. So I agree with you on that. But once again, you got to try. Don't be afraid to try.
Yep. Let me bounce this off you guys. I know I told the other guys this earlier before you came down, but there was this kid, Bo Templin is his name, a young sort of content creator. He asks really good questions. And he asked me why certain athletes, this is a good question for you too, Dan, and Rich, you see these guys at the top. And why certain, so we look at Canelo, and although our ability to assess Canelo is in and of itself a high developed skill that we may or may not all possess, we can look at Canelo or Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky in his prime, and these certain greats actually continue to get better, whereas many other people, great performers or great athletes, plateau. And why can certain athletes like this continue to get better? And I thought that was just a wonderfully interesting question.
Dan, you want to take a stab at that?
I mean, I see people at our gym that get better and succeed and continue to get better and get better and get better. Then I see other people that plateau off and start to regress. And sometimes it's physical, their body just breaks down, they can't take it. A lot of times it's mental, but what I see for the most part, sometimes it's just complacency. Sometimes when things are going really good for you, certain breed of people, they just get complacent. When I was running my business, when things got tough and we had to scrap and try to find ways to stay afloat, we would work our ass off and come up with all these ideas to save money and make more money. We'd say, shit, why didn't I come up with this 5 years ago? I just found a way to, cut $700,000 a year off the bottom line. And if I could have done that 5 years ago, and I would have made an extra $3.5 million over that period of time. But you know what? I was fat and fucking lazy back then because things were rocking and I didn't need to. So I think it's a combination of that. Some people got different things going on in their life. Some people let that affect them. Some people don't. Some people hit their groove late in life. I mean, shit. A couple of years ago, Masvidal was fucking sofa hopping. He didn't have a place to fucking live. He was so broke. I was afraid to answer his phone call because every time it rang, he wanted money. And he went on that reality show down in South America and somehow spent a lot of time thinking about it. And he came back and he looked at me and said, dude, I've changed everything. I'm going to start baptizing people. I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck that means. And trust me, I had all this time out there just thinking to myself, looking up at a dark sky, and it's clicked. I realized what I've been doing wrong all these years, and just watch. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll watch. Let's go get something to eat. And fuck if it didn't. So some people hit their groove more often than not. I just think people get complacent.
Yeah.
On that note, Dan, I got to give you credit because when I think about the guys that have made these, have reinvented themselves, had this late career resurgence, the guys that I think about, a lot of them were with you. Guys that I've worked with in the past, Robbie Lawler. I mean, I worked with Robbie for years, Elite XC, Strike Force. You just never thought. I didn't think he could be a champion again. I'll be honest. He ends up with you guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, he got brought over from Strike Force and fought Josh Koscheck. I thought he was going to lose that fight and be one and done himself. So I'd be lying if I disagreed with you.
Yeah, it's just not common, right? It's very rare, as you guys mentioned. Masvidal, fought for the title in Strikeforce, didn't beat Gill. You just didn't, I didn't expect this. Like is Andre with you guys right now? Arlovsky? Just seeing him fight this past weekend. So, credit to you guys, whatever you got going on over there.
What is it in the water,
To help these guys break through these plateaus that we're talking about where, I mean, I've been surprised. Sounds like you've been with these guys, and it's awesome because
something's working.
Yeah.
We've got a really good staff of coaches. We've got a really good group of training partners, but maybe equally as importantly, we've been around doing this for 20-something years, and we've made more mistakes than most other people have made, and we've learned from them. So maybe some of the mistakes we made and learned from some of the newer gyms or coaches, they haven't made those mistakes yet. And sometimes the only way to learn from them is to fuck it up the first time.
Yep. That's, I mean, a lot of learning is going to come from trial and error, failure and setback and readjustment, right? One of my thinkings on this is that, and this is, you guys have really opened up a lot of really interesting parts here, because Andre Arlovsky shifting into another phase, or Jorge shifting into another phase, or Robbie Lawler shifting into another phase is actually not the same question, but it actually answers the question in a different way. Because the question, as I see it, or the answer, as I see it for Canelo, is first we get the answer, and then we go, well, how do we understand that answer? The answer is, presumably, he's getting more out of training at this point than his contemporaries, or the ones who can continue to grow. Sometimes it's better training, sometimes it's better coaching, better direction, better elders, but sometimes they actually just extract more value from the time, the repetition, the training, the deliberate practice. Somehow that's what's happening. And and among the questions are, focus itself is a skill. Focus is a skill. You can improve your focus. Motivation is a skill. You can train your motivation, and you can extract. So on some level, that's what you guys are talking about. But if we use those three examples, in Jorge's case, it was focus and motivation. He said, he came back and he said, I thought about it. I'm going to extract more from my time in there, and I'm going to make it work. We don't know. And maybe that's the case with Robbie Lawler. Plus rest.
It was 1,000% mental for George, because he had the tools to do that.
Yeah, true. It is fascinating. It is. It's fucking fascinating. I got to bounce, guys. Do you guys, by all means, you guys want to hang out with together, please do. Dan, will you come back and join us again, man? You fit in with the three of us nerds so well.
I like talking fight. Call me anytime.
Hey, Dan, fighting, pro wrestling.
Even better.
Do this all day, right? And congrats on, earlier we talked about guys going for it later in life, taking chances, taking risks. Congrats to you on your pro wrestling career, your childhood dream coming later on in life, man. Good for you.
Yeah, career may be a little bit of a stretch of the word, but I'll tell you what, having a blast while it's lasting.
Awesome, man. Keep it going.
All right, thanks.
Yeah,
guys.
honestly, we're enjoying watching you. And Dan, it's a fucking pleasure every time I see you on. Speaking of Jorge, on Jorge's shows. I think we got another one in December, but I'm sure he hasn't told you about it yet.
He'll tell me like a week before.
yeah, I know. But man, I'm looking. I hope I see you there. It was such a great time seeing you last time, man. Thanks for hanging with us.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that was fun, man.
Hey, that was pretty cool.
So the MMA halls, I don't know if you guys know of them. Awesome.
Yes.
Anybody that's watching MMA halls, they're really great. They're friends, and they're great podcasters / streamers, whatever the hell we call these things. They put this up, and I was just like, we can ask Dan about. Nah, we'll ask him another time. Also, that's just starting to get outside of the realm, into the realm of things that just we don't talk about, because it's just bothersome in many ways, right? Like, who are we? First of all, we don't know what John Jones or any of these guys do or didn't do or said or didn't say, and the whole thing gets uncomfortable. But MMA halls, you guys talk about it, and we'll add the link somewhere when you guys are talking about this kind of stuff. No judgment.
They said they had to try. You had to try. So.
Hey, but hey, I think Dan did address it. You know, they've made many mistakes.
True.
I think he addressed a lot of things with that statement. They've made many mistakes, and over the last 25 or plus years, and they figured out a lot. So
it's true. It is true. You know who I spoke to, and I'll ask him if you guys want. I spoke to yesterday for my friends at Haymakers, and it'll be up in a couple of days. I had like a 45-minute hangout with Diego Sanchez. And honestly, it was wonderful. And he would really be somebody, he wasn't, again, same thing. We weren't talking about, weird coaches or like changing things or like trouble or rivalries, a lot weird shit. We were talking about martial arts, and man, was it nice. He's a really great, thoughtful martial artist on a really weird journey of his own, man.
I'd love to talk to him. He's one of the guys that I gravitated the first Ultimate Fighter. I was like, I want to see what happens to this, to this guy.
Yeah.
He's been around forever. So yeah, I'd love that.
He's one of one, isn't he?
He really is.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're all very nuanced and complex. People are, all of us. And he is too. So I can't speak for what he would be like on a different day, but on this day, like he was just very thoughtful, and it was very journey learning, martial arts oriented. He gave me advice on, how to be a good husband when your wife is pregnant, or how to be a good dad in the first 6 months. Like, good advice, excellent advice. Like, yeah, it was. So let me, when I'm talking to him in the next couple of weeks, I'll ask him. But yeah, I'm keeping an open mind about like martial artists. Lambert is very much one, but he's very much a unique one. You won't get him to admit he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu all that often. Although, like he said, he's been one for a long time. Yeah. But man, you can get him going when he's talking about pro wrestling.
Yeah, his first love, man. It came through there. Dan, I found out a long time ago personally, like years ago, we were in Florida. He invited me over to his house to hang out with the guys, and he had this big room in his house, just all mats, and all the guys were there training. I'm like, man, this guy, he's a jiu-jitsu junkie, man, for sure.
Yeah. He's
I want to say mid 2000s, and I'm like, yeah, this guy. Wow. It was very cool to see his passion for martial arts. Yeah. He wasn't just this guy that formed this team, and he was rooted, in it. Yeah. And as we've talked about, that's the kind of stuff that we all gravitate towards, right?
Yep. No, it was fun. This was a fun one, guys. This was a fun one. Next Wednesday, Mal, you'll be in Florida, but we'll all be here in this spot.
Yes, sir. I'm planning on it. Best part of the week, as we've all said.
Yeah. We're going to try to clip a few clips. If you guys got 5 minutes, think about any that you think might be good and jot them down. And then between Mal and I, we'll clip a few. Oh, wait. We were promised Machida, GSP, Boss Rutan. Just kidding. I'll listen. We're going to get them. Okay, I'm sending Machida a text right now.
See, look at that. Look, you ask and he does. This is great. This is interaction at its finest.
Send Lyoto a text. And if and when there's a likelihood I'm going to shoot in on a Wednesday in an undisclosed location in December for Karate Combat, I will try to get one or a few of those guys together over a coffee or a beer or something, all in this group. We'll see.
That will be absolutely insane.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. I got a jet,
thanks,
and
everybody.
I won't be able to do our 15-20-minute hangout after, but I will catch up with you guys really soon.
All right. Catch you guys next week. We're in now.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Black Belt
Magazine.
Indeed.
Enjoy the hostilities.